Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. This is a show about astrology. As you all know, those of you who follow me, thank you for your support, and I'm glad that you follow me and are interested in astrology. And today I've got a great guest on, a friend of mine from down under in Australia. Julia Simas is going to be joining us in a few minutes here. And we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that has to do with astrology and social media and how things can get a little bit out of whack once in a while. So it's going to be an interesting topic, and we're both astrologers. We've both been doing this for a long time, and yet we see a lot of stuff on the web and on social media in particular where things get a little bit crazy. So we're just going to try to have a little good conversation about that. It's sort of ethical astrology, what works, what doesn't. But before we do that, I want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday. In there you'll find a couple paragraphs of mundane astrology, and then I break it out into the individual signs. I encourage you to read your sun sign and your rising sign to get more accuracy. And if you have any questions, you know who to call. You call me, and I will take care of you with a good astrology reading. So that's always the way to go if you have any questions about it. Astrology is a fascinating art and science, and it is incredibly complex, which brings us to this topic. And in there, many people spend decades, years studying it to get the facts straight. Other people can easily just pick up glean some information off the web, patch it together, cut and paste, and all of a sudden they call themselves an astrologer. And that is a false pretense, and that's what we're here to talk about. So, from down under, Julia Simas is here today. She is the founder and guiding light behind the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, also known as the CIA, which I love. I met her years ago at a astrology conference, and we had a good time talking about all the things we could do together as astrologers. And so it's great to have you on, and we are talking over Skype, and you know that it's 7 o'clock in the U.S. and it's 9 o'clock tomorrow over there, so it's very interesting. But welcome to the show, Julia. It's great to have you on.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So let's just peel this onion back a little bit. We had about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We heard this. I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that, but we saw a bit of a tussle about astrology topics and how they were interpreted, and some interesting concepts that were coming out in the world from different people that you find on social media. So there's a whole group of people who are known as flat earthers, which of course I always find to be comical because I thought they all died when Columbus died. But here we are in this day where we have satellites and we've got astronauts taking pictures of this gigantic ball in the sky, and people are saying that the Earth is flat. So based on that sort of as a premise, there we go into the whole idea of what is known, what I can see, or what we have talked about as being false astrology, or what could also be known as fake news. So in this world where we have this, how do you think, Julia, we combine this, how do we address this problem with getting the authentic astrology, the real truthful knowledge out there? How do you think, this is just sort of a rhetorical question for you, how do you think we could approach this? What would be the best way?
Oh, wear a badge.
Yeah, wear a badge. There you go. Carry some ID.
That's our way.
Yeah, carry ID.
Well, it's funny from all of this eruption that some people will know about, and maybe we'll get into it a bit. But it sort of became a reason that if you belong to the CIA, you've got ethics and standards and a certain know-how about astrology.
You got some credentials.
Yeah, you got some credentials. So that kind of, it wasn't something we planned or I planned. It's just the way things evolve. So, what I have sort of started in the beginning, which was the CIA, the badge almost became a bit more important again,
Yeah, no kidding.
Which is always, has been just a bit of fun, ourselves calling ourselves agents, and agents also
It's a
being
great marketing tool. It's
agency.
a great idea. I love it.
Yeah, so it's the badge that the people that are connected to us have a certain understanding of astrology. And look, some people aren't particularly, what do you call it, officially trained, but you can tell by what they're doing, what they're writing, what their know-how is, how much they have integrated. So I mean, that's the whole thing. You can't become an astrologer overnight. You have to put in the hours.
That's right. Yeah, you got to
We
put the
all
time
know
in.
that, the hours and the years. It doesn't happen, in a couple of weeks, which is, I mean, I know there's all sorts of courses online that you can do, but it just depends how it's marketed, like you can do a top-up class in 10 weeks, but you can't become an astrologer in 10 weeks, yeah?
Right.
So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that's out there at the moment as well. So again, different levels, different... so many people learning different levels of astrology as well. But I really think that to be, to call yourself an astrologer, you need, let's say, a few years of grounding, just like
You need some basics, yeah.
amount of time. Yeah, you need the basics. And I think that can't be done, which is the kind of way that most, let's say, more official astrology organizations would call it a certificate, which you do 2 years of study, right? So you do a certain amount of reading and recommended reading and all that type of stuff to have a good basis. So I think unless you've done that, that's the grounding that everyone needs to start with. And that's what we teach at the CIA, like get your 2 years worth in,
Right.
because that's what I did and that's what I know that works. Sure, others can be more ahead or they're starting at a different sort of level. So there's many variations. It's very hard to, again, I don't want to be the police for it, but the word is, to police.
But I think that's an accurate representation of the thing is that you see, astrology is different in some ways because it really is it's got formulas to it, it's got mathematical precision to it, it's got certain rules to it, it's got a whole set of a whole jargon, a whole syntax that goes with it. It's got symbology. There's many different aspects to it, no pun intended. And those are inclusive. And you can't just, I think what happens is, this is part of the problem when astrology became popular back in the 1930s, when they first started writing daily horoscopes. I think people were misled in some ways by it because there really is... I've always been the type of astrologer that says, listen, I'm never going to tell you to go out and buy a lottery ticket on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever, but I would say that this might be a week where money might be involved. I approach astrology as a theme-oriented modality whereby I would say, this is what's going to be going on in your life. This is just how I approach it. And I usually work with the transits. I work with the transits. That's what I like. And it's something that's comfortable. But there's many ways to delineate and interpret a chart. And I think that is where things have gone awry now because there's so much social media out there and things are so pervasive and information is so quick. And also, I have to say, I have to ask you this question. Do you think that computer astrology programs help or hurt the individual, the client in the long run? I mean, has it become too cookie cutter?
You mean software?
Software,
like
yeah.
apps and stuff where you can... Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that come into that, and I have thought about this, like part of it has been great for astrology and part of it is the detriment to it.
Exactly,
yes, as you say, because people don't know what they're doing and what they're reading and what these circles are all about, like when they're looking at the app, right? They're just seeing all these symbols. They know what Jupiter in Capricorn, what the symbols are, but they don't know what the basis of these circles is, or are. Same with things like, social media has been great for astrology, right? Like it's been great in the sense of, the internet before, but then, social media, the way we're all sharing, the way, the information's flowing everywhere, but at the same time, it's all that fake news that's flying around and everything in amongst it all. So, there's both sides. It's very Jupiter Libra at the moment, isn't it? So
Yeah, it
it's two
certainly
sides
is.
of what's right, what's wrong.
I mean, I think of astrology. I actually approach astrology almost as I would a philosophy of sorts. I think that it's not a belief system, but it is a philosophy of sorts that allows us to glance at the world through a mundane eye. And mundane, for those of you who don't know in astrology, I'm sure most of you listening do know, mundane does not mean boring or benign. It means it applies to all of us. When we look at the world.
In mundo,
In mundo,
isn't it?
yes, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
world.
when we see this in mundo, in the world, we see these common traits, and we know where activity is, and it is supported dramatically by what we see in the world events. That goes back to that old Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below, and these are concepts that work, and I think allow us to look at society. I spend a lot of time working with mundane astrology. I love the idea of this big global view. I've got Jupiter in my 8th house, but I see this big global view of the earth and where we are and how things are happening and how it affects culture and societies and politics and countries. And to me, that makes a lot of sense and has great validity to it. But I'm not sure that it can be seen as, people I think oftentimes come to astrology usually when they're having a difficult time, like they would go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and you can't get the same kind of information out of when things are coming and going in your life, and it's very useful for that. But I wonder if people aren't putting too much value into their day-to-day lives by seeing what's going on. Now, if you're an astrologer, as you are and I am, and we look at our charts for the day, I typically will see where the moon is. I know where everything else is going on. I just should typically say, okay, well, the moon's here today. I'm going to see what's going on, and I use that as my baseline. But I wonder if the social media piece hasn't sort of, like you say, it's a double-edged sword. It has been the greatest boon to us, but it's also been the greatest bane to us because it does allow these false prophets to come out and pose as something that they aren't. And that's what concerns me.
Yeah, well, I kind of, I've always wanted to, it's good that we're talking about it because I've always wanted to write a, kind of serious article about it just to alert people about, things, what to watch for. One of the things I found, which, it's kind of goes, oh, geez, but this kind of stuff has been going around for a long time. Older astrologers will say we've fought this in other ways, over the years, or trash astrology in magazines or on TV or, whatever. But because everyone knows astrology sells, right?
It does.
This is one thing that we know is astrology sells. So what you find is, a headline sort of saying, Libra and Aquarius are the best lovers, okay? So, you might have a glance because you're a Libra and Aquarius, they've got you, right?
Right, of course.
You've got you.
Of course they do.
And then you go to the page and you know that it's not written by anyone because there's no author attached. Now, I'm always very suspicious about websites that have no author attached to the article. So, they're written by robots or whatever it is, and it's full of ads, right? So
well, of course
it's
it is,
full
yeah.
of ads. So it's all the clickbait. So, click on this page and, we're going to make, $5 from your visit or whatever it is,
Or they'll do what's the best, who's your ideal lover? And so people will say, oh my gosh, I'm an Aries, I've got to go out and find my best lover, or I'm a Gemini, I got to find my best lover. And they'll
some
do this.
of that is great and it's fun and it's entertaining, but again, it's what at the other end, people are after, and again, there's so much clickbait, there's so much copied information. I'm still trying to work out how do they get away with it? They just copy someone's article, put their name on it, reference the other one, but they've copied the whole thing. I doubt they've got permission for it. We've found that with a few websites copying our agents' work and saying Cosmic Intelligence Agency, because our name comes up in a search and then it might go to theirs first. So it's really frustrating.
Yeah, there's a real ethical problem with that, and this is part of a fallout of the digital world because things are so easily reproduced. Musicians go through this problem with their songs and music getting copied and taken.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, we're not the only ones. Yes.
writers get taken for this. I mean, anybody can do it, and it's just a matter of, as you say, who are the police? Well, I guess the Central Cosmic Intelligence Agency could be the police, but that's a huge task to take on.
Someone said yes. They said, Jules, do you really want to take on that job? And I said no.
No, that's a
Well,
monumental
we don't.
job.
You know, we want to have fun what we're doing, and that kind of thing is just all about arguments and, I mean, no. We can watch it and we'll write the occasional thing about it, or I was thinking of, probably doing a live broadcast about it somehow, just to again keep people aware where to find good astrology, because it is so confusing out there. And so, I mean, all of us know each other, don't we?
Right, of course.
We've met at conferences, or we know each other through someone else. So it's kind of, there's this mutual respect between those of us that know each other. And of course, there's a lot in the sideline, that, okay, I mean, I'm not placing so much importance on just us, but there are many out there as well that I'm not saying they're not good astrologers or doing good work that we have no idea about. So, it's that sort of collective grouping of what we all do, but I think that's also raised a lot of competition.
It's very. I think it's a very competitive field, and I've always been surprised by that because I don't see myself as being competitive. But I've spoken with other people about this topic, and they say, well, doctors are the same way, and yeah. I maybe they are. I don't have any idea. I personally am not that way. My goal in doing the show is just to help people get educated and to introduce people to great astrologers from around the world. That was my only purpose, and I'm been doing this for 10 years, and I've never really thought of it any other way. It's just, this is fun. I like to get to people, talk to people, introduce them to new concepts and ideas, and let it go with that. I don't see myself as a competitive astrologer, although I know it can be competitive. What concerns me is that we're in a time now in the world, as you well know, where there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of tension, and we could say this probably about any time in the world, but it seems as if the degree and the depth of drama now has definitely been heightened by at least one person in particular from this country that I know of. And as a result of that rhetoric being heightened, people are saying, what is going on? We got this nutball in the White House. We got earthquakes. We got tornadoes. We've got hurricanes. We've got forest fires. And people start coming to me in the supermarket and they say, what is going on? I'm like, it's not an easy answer to deliver because it is complex, but the astrology does support it. It does support it.
Well, remember what astrologers said about the year ahead, even from like January to the Aries ingress, which was, of course, Venus retrograde. Right. So, Venus retrograde at an equinox, which defines our astrological year, will happen every 8 years. So, I don't know. I remember looking at that and going, yeah, it's going to be an interesting year.
Oh, it's going to be an interesting year. There's no question about it. But I think if you look back historically through time, anybody would say, well, we all years are interesting, but they're not. They're not. That's a misconception. There are years when there's a lot of, there's not much activity. Of course, there's activity across the world no matter what. People are going to be born. People are going to be murdered. There's always this drama as long as humans are alive. But the degree to where it involves mass populations, when we see immigration, I've read some figures the other day, like 65 million people are on the move.
On the move, yeah.
On the move.
Neptune in Pisces,
yeah,
hey?
because
they are breaking down.
The borders are just, and then there's this heightened rhetoric and the talk of war when no one wants that, and they know that it's a no-win situation. We have this distorted sense of reality, which is completely, Neptunian. When Donald Trump walked out onto the stage in the Republican National Convention, he walked out in a bank of fog. What could be more Neptunian than him, a reality star, walking out into a bank of fog? It's like this is a complete illusion. And that supports this same. So we are living in actually very interesting times. That's the old Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. Right. Well, we are.
Well, at least they're interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, I can't see this kind of calming down. And, like 2020 is coming up. I don't want to be alarmist, but, when's it settling down? There's always changes astrologically, isn't there? And there's a few more big ones coming up, let's say.
Well, that's what concerns me. Yeah, the Uranus and Taurus, and then we've got Saturn is going to be conjunct Pluto soon, and Jupiter's going to be joining it. That is no small thing. These things don't happen every week. This is the sort of thing that takes
No.
decades, centuries for these planets to align. But when they do, they leave their imprint, and that's what we're living through. So when people stop you on the street and say, when's this going to end? I basically say, maybe, 2024, 25, something like that. You have to take
It's
the long
hard to
view.
say. Well, I think the let's say the bigness of, let's say, the last month or two is, the last month has been the eclipse, of course, over the USA, and then Jupiter Uranus, coming up to their final kind of third opposition. So
Right.
that's a pretty overwhelming energy, isn't it? Like, there's change happening. It's like, who to trust. I mean, they're two big guys, really kind of trying to be alive. Well, being very alive out there.
Yeah, and you can't ignore that. And then everybody, each person has that aspect somewhere in their chart, so it's going to impact how they
Yep.
are themselves, and that's just the way it is. But I think that in times of trouble or drama, as we're seeing now, because the headlines, I mean, boom. I went to the New York Times today, which is that's my go-to place for news, and there were more headlines on there than I could believe. There would be, every one of them would have been a headline unto itself. They must have had a hard time
Yeah.
deciding which headline do we choose. Do we choose Donald Trump screaming at North Korea? Do we choose the Mexican earthquake? Do we choose Puerto Rico getting
Yep.
battered by a hurricane? It all seems to be colliding at the same time, which, of course, increases the tension for all of us and makes everybody run around wondering, is the world coming to an end? And that's not a bad, necessarily an illogical place to go. We could easily see that. I'm not trying to be an alarmist either, but I'm saying it does, when we see so many events stacked up, especially with things back to back, 2 hurricanes, 2 earthquakes, then it becomes like, wow, what's happening next? And,
Yeah.
and then that is not the end of it. So I think that raises people's tension. It raises their interest in astrology. So they turn to astrology, I think, in an effort to find answers, which is fine because the answers are there. But as you know, as you learned astrology is not an easy science to learn, and it does require work on the client, the individual who wants that information, to do some self-examination and to understand what's actually happening. That's where people, I think, are too quick. They want a quick fix. They want to get it on their cell phone. What's my horoscope
Yep.
for today? Boom.
Yep.
Whereas it's a much more detailed, complex conundrum that requires serious thought, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I've got the chart of now in front of me, and it's kind of like, here it is. This is the collective psyche. How do we heal that?
Right.
You know.
Well, how do we, if not healing, if we can't heal it, how do we at least, work through it? How do we mitigate it? How do we, lessen its impact on us individuals? Or how do we?
Well, I think as astrologers, we help people understand, let's say, the crazy times or the more heightened times. We try and keep it more positive, don't we? Because, especially the people that write for the CIA and the agents and stuff, we're kind of uplifting them into inspiring, more than doom and gloom, for sure. But some things are, unavoidable in that kind of sense, like Saturn with Black Moon Lilith at the moment. That's a pretty intense energy where everyone's got something inside rising really strong about their own truth and who they are and what they want to be in this world. So, and it's important to everyone for everyone to connect to that. And then also, so therefore we see everyone doing that, somehow.
I think it's important to be positive because as you well know, every challenge has the gem in it of a great potential to do something wonderful. I am a strong believer that squares are your best friend in some ways because they force you to take action. If you have someone with a trine, or loads of trines, or easy aspects in the chart, or in the chart of the planet even, you're going to have it's going to be I think prone to apathy and complacency. Whereas when the challenges come, people rise to the challenge. That builds the character. That gets stuff done. And that's the way I approach it. So I think it's important to be optimistic and positive all times and just say, hey, life is difficult, man. This is just how it is. No one says it's going to be a walk in the park. Yeah,
well, that's right. We don't, if we kind of, bow down to the the despair and this is going nowhere kind of attitude, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we're in this time of transition now. So astrologers, in a sense, have that role to help guide us through, which we do to the individual, don't we? So on a more collective kind of level, it's going, this too shall pass, or it's going to go into this into this theme next year. And we knew that this year was going to be chaotic. Uranus and Eris, Eris is still something we're very much researching.
We still don't know. Yeah, we don't know that much. It's still a new thing to us. We haven't got enough mileage on the car yet to know how it's going to be, I guess.
But she's been so prominent in this grand fire trine going on, so it's almost like you can't ignore her either.
No,
well, I can't.
No, you can't. You can't. And we have to say, at what point do we attach a certain quality to any planet? What do we attach to it? How much significance do we place on it? That's why I think it requires more than just a casual pop up on your phone for today's horoscope. I mean, that's good in some ways. Sometimes it's okay. I think you need a much broader stroke in order to a much broader paintbrush to get a better idea of what's going on.
Well, yeah, this is the whole thing. I mean, years ago, we'd probably, we'd read a book about Eris or something. I mean, just for as an example, and, read other astrologers about what Eris is. And a lot of astrologers would say, can't use Eris because she hasn't been around long enough. But if we think about something like the exponential sort of growth in information that happens all the time now. Someone writes something about Eris, thousands of people read it or whatever. So there is much more information floating around and quicker at our fingertips to kind of grasp and put together than there ever was. Like when Uranus was discovered, it took, so long for the information about Uranus to get across to America or whatever it was, Right. So, I mean, this is something just to consider how quickly everything flies around at the moment, with information. So, things going viral or, that 13th sign syndrome thing that comes up every now and then, that we all have to, kind of rise up and sort of say, we understand why we use 12 signs or, and why we still
regard
up for against us,
right? Why we still regard Pluto as a major planet? This has always been our conundrum, and we just have to dispel it and make sure that the information gets out there properly. It is it is a bit of a challenge, and it's an interesting field to be in because of the fact that it deals with the esoteric arts. It's an esoteric art. It's an esoteric science. I have no question in my mind, and as I know you, that we know how accurate it is. It's a matter of being able to, to interpret it properly. And in the interpretation comes, I think, some of the problems, because some people are better at interpretation than others, and that's bound to be the case for anything, just as one doctor may be better than another doctor. But the ability to have the intuitive quality required to parse the information, I think, is perhaps a natural ability that some people have and some people don't have. Not all men are created equal, or women are created equal, and some people have a better handle on how to handle this kind of information than others, and that would bear out in the birth chart of the individual for sure. But it does take a certain, and this is something that is not, I'm not even sure that you can. There's certain people you can teach it to, but not everybody will be able to understand it. I have found this in my discussions with other people. Novices who are trying to understand astrology, or those who didn't understand astrology, trying to get across that sort of golden nugget of information that really sort of ties the room together with regard to what could be happening, how to tell the story behind the aspect. Because I do think astrology is a series of stories, especially in the individual's chart. There are stories there. How the story manifests itself depends upon being brought to their attention, but also how it relates to their individual life. Two people born at the same place and time, minutes apart, go through. They have similar characteristics, but their life and their environment will color that differently, and that's where I think people get confused.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's been a discussion sort of floating around in one of the astro groups about, southern southern hemisphere and northern hemisphere signs,
Right.
and the difference between that, because there's a lot of things that, out there that people go, well, it doesn't make sense because, I'm born in the south and you're born in the north. And so, you're an Aries, so you're born at the time of Aries in the north, but down here, it's autumn time.
Heading into autumn, I know, exactly. And that makes a big difference because a Capricorn born in the northern hemisphere and enters the world, just think about it just very physically, enters the world and it's cold, it's dark, and it's foreboding. Whereas a Leo enters the world and the sun is shining and the world, and that's all those aspects apply to that time. Yet, you take a Capricorn down in Australia, and what's it like in Capricorn time? It's the beach weather.
Well,
right?
I just read something by it was an Australian astrologer. Now I just can't remember her name, and I'm sorry if she hears this, but from Adelaide, and she wrote about, so Australian Capricorns are tall and bronzed, and usually that's the look of them, whereas more in the north they're actually quite the opposite, like the real kind of older Senex type of body model. And that's the summer Capricorn and a winter Capricorn. Like I'm a late summer Pisces, and I hate the cold. If I was born in the north, I would be probably more attuned to the cold, so
exactly. So I think that whole entry into the realm of Earth, the time that you're born, depending upon where you're born, I think merits a lot of extra thought, and that would be that's a good
what
area.
Season you are as a Pisces or an Aries or whatever, because that will add to your temperament or your character or just the way you approach life, I think, definitely. And as we know, astrology is full of polarities, so the opposite sign is very much, in the yin and yang sense, very much part of that one thing.
Of course.
It makes sense. And I mean, what I love about what's going on out there at the moment, let's say, is the way we're all interacting. We're learning from each other. It's so much easier to connect, into the groups that you like and that type of thing. So there's a lot of great stuff going on out there as well. So again, that's what I'd prefer to concentrate on than being like the police,
Oh, yeah, no, I understand.
That's not going to be fun.
So you're not going to be the police. But anyway, we won't let you be the police. Anyway, we're talking today with Julia Simas. She is the founder and guiding light behind the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, also known as CIA, so speaking of police. And we'll take a quick break right here. We're going to come back. We're talking today about sort of the ethics of astrology and how it's been misconstrued or how easily it can be misconstrued. We're sort of in a delicate balance, but we're going to continue our talk when we return, so we'll be right back. Her website is cosmicintelligenceagency.com. Correct? And on there you'll find a wide range of information that's very useful, and we'll be right back in a few minutes, so hang in there. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color. Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is Julia Simas. She is the guider, the founding light and guiding light, I should say, founder and guiding.
I like guider.
Oh, yeah, the guider. Yeah, she's the guiding light. Well, she can be the head guider. She's behind the rocket ship called Cosmic Intelligence Agency, which is located in Australia. So we're talking on. It's Wednesday for me. It's Thursday for her, but that's okay. We speak the same language, and we're talking today about sort of the realm of the ethics of astrology and how people come to it. We're just sort of bouncing a bunch of questions around. Does astrology software enable or disable people? I mean, I've drawn up charts by hand in the old days when you had to do it that way, and I know that basic core understanding of how to construct a chart by hand is incredibly valuable, much the way it is for photographers to study how to use real film. The way architects need to use real pencils and papers to draw their buildings. It's not that they rely on it, but that they should know it as a basic foundational tool because it gives logic and form and function to why they're doing what they're doing. If a photographer uses real film, he's going to be, they need to know certain language and technical information, much the way astrologers do. And I'm wondering, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, if people would go out and say, well, I'll go out and buy a software program and I'll put my information in, all of a sudden I'll call myself an astrologer. But does the information that's provided in the software, do you think how do you feel about that? I mean, I have mixed feelings about it myself. I know that there's times I think it's useful because sometimes I've got a good question about something. Other times I'm afraid that people simply rely on what's available free as opposed to looking to the real research of what an astrologer can provide.
Yeah, well, again, it's that quick fix type of thing. I'll click on Saturn in Sagittarius here in the app and it will tell me something about it, right?
Right.
But I don't think they connect the aspects yet, do they?
Well,
you can get reports on software as well, yeah.
Yeah, you can, and that's okay. And some of them are broad and general. But I think what the difference is that you want to get it's the granularity that the astrologer brings to it. It's the eye of the interpreter that really makes the difference.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that takes practice and having, worked with a lot of clients over the time. I mean, not all astrologers will work with clients, as that's the other thing. Not everyone's a consultant, so there's so many variations in, what an astrologer does, and that's fair enough and stuff. But if you're going to be a consulting astrologer, you need lots of practice.
And there's a whole set of rules and ethics that go with it. I mean, how do you deal with difficult aspects? How do you deal with if somebody asks you, do you see sickness in my chart? Do you see death in my chart? I mean, you have to find a delicate balance, much the way you would if you were a psychologist. I mean, it's very similar.
Yeah. I mean, look, we see it all the time. One of my clients just recently had a very bad accident, and I did a reading for her about something else like a month before. And I saw a Pluto coming up to her Mars, kind of, she says, what is that all about? She had relationship issues going on at the time, another very complicated story that way, which I won't get into, but and then she was in a very bad motorbike accident. So I mean, look, I wasn't going to sort of not that I saw anything like that in there, but when you kind of hear about it later, you go, oh, am I supposed to have known that? Right. That there was something like that coming up. Besides, again, it related to the story, the Mars-Pluto, to an intense relationship and big decisions that she was having at the time, right?
Right.
Which related to that Mars-Pluto, but I would never have sort of said, oh, and watch out, I mean, of course, it's not just one thing, but I'm just kind of using it as an
I
example
think it's a
that
valid...
as astrologers we can go, oh gosh, I missed that, but was I supposed to know that? I mean, what I'm going to tell her, don't go out on, that week or...
Well, no, that's the point. I don't think that we should be doing that, to be honest. If you were to ask me, I wouldn't. That's my comment earlier about buying a lottery ticket. I would not suggest someone do that. I would say over the course of this time, you may see, if the second house is highlighted, I'd say, well, pay attention to your finances. It could go either way, and you have to find a way to sort of address that. But I think if people come to us with questions about specific questions, is it a good time for a career? Should I fall in love with so and so? Those questions, I think, can be pretty accurately constructed. There's a time when you know that you're going to be asked to be more responsible in some ways. If you've got a strong Saturn aspect, there's be times when you're going to have opportunity to be perhaps more expansive, and other times that are represented by other planets. I think we can give that kind of information. I'm not sure that we can do like you say, don't ride your bike tomorrow, because although in the old days astrologers, we were hired by kings or employed by kings would do that sort of thing, but those were generally bigger events such as eclipses and things that were really sort of off-putting. Yeah, no, well that's right. Gosh, working with clients has taught me so much, about astrology. So I think that, anyway, it's an inroad to just understanding so much more about how it works, timing. Sometimes the timing's spot on, sometimes it's not, it's not so much. But, often I get the email a few months later. It's exactly as you said, the timing is perfect, and you love that. You go, well, this is where we're relying on the astrological model that we use for transits, progression, solar arcs, whatever we put into it, to sort of go, well, that timing is really, this is when I can see the shift going from what you're doing, what's happening now, to shifting out of this experience. So and I've seen it so many times now, so that we get more confident about, let's say, predicting that moment. You will be out of this by September. Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, it gets more complicated because there are so many different forms of astrology and different methods of interpretation that we, as a community, have never really standardized. There is the standardization tests and stuff like that are provided that do offer a sense of commonness. But I've always been of the opinion that if you took 3 or 4 different astrologers from different different forms of astrology, put them in the same room with the same person, they should come up with the same types of characteristics. That's how I've always thought it should be. Yeah, I think there's been a few experiments done like that, hasn't there? There was a book about it a few years ago or 10 years ago or something where, from different aspects or different writers, they were interpreting the chart. I think TMA's done that as well, the Mountain Astrologer. Oh, yeah. Similar stuff like that. And yes, that's right. We should come up with the same things. That sort of supports the whole idea of astrology as a valid modality that is that's been that has got credence. I think, but the other thing is that because it is in this very vague area where people still consider to be sort of they roll their eyes sometimes when you tell them you're an astrologer, or they say, "Oh wow, really? Here I am. Here's my birthday." I get both. I get both responses, but because it's in that realm where it isn't sort of nailed down, people tend to discount it in some ways. But I hold the contention that almost everybody knows their sign, and I think at some level, whether they admit it or not, are secretly always checking what's going on. I think this is a... Yeah, that's right. I think meeting people, like I always say, well, okay, you know your sun sign, but do find out about your moon sign and your Venus sign and your, exactly. Go a bit further, because that's what's, what you can find out these days. There's more and more, and there's much more than just sun sign astrology out there, which is, I remember when we started the CIA, so back in, I think we got our first webpage in 2006. There was not a lot of, let's say, information spread through astrologers' newsletters, right? So emails were, out there, but social media had just started.
And what we started reporting on was equinoxes and solstices as a collective kind of astrological look, at what's going on.
Right.
And then we started adding things like, oh, well, let's who wants to write about the new moon? Let's write about the new moon. Let's write about the full moon. And then social media started buzzing up, and now everybody writes about the new moon. I'm not saying we started it, but we certainly had a big, well, maybe we did, I don't know, but, a big impact into what everyone's writing about. Now I sort of think like, oh gosh, another new moon in Virgo, thing floating through the thread that there's just way too much now. But I know that's my thread and who I'm connected to and stuff.
Right, but I think that there is too much. I mean, and I think people have a difficult time discerning who to do that. So I think that's why certain people develop a certain following or have people who understand their delivery method or their consultation method or their interpretation method, and they're fond of them. But I also find that, I've had clients who have come to me. I say, don't come to me more than once a year. I mean, even though I'm shooting myself in the foot because I could use the money, I say, don't come to me because things aren't going to change that quickly. I've had somebody who contacted me, twice in the same month, and I said, well, I mean, you're still in the same boat right now. Things have not changed that much, and they were.
Have you made this? Well, this is where counselling comes in.
Right, I know.
So they need that more. They need more. Going into it in more depth or whatever. I mean, it depends what you want to do. But yeah, I have needed to refer people to others. Again, like we come to a limit. Like, this is all I can really help you with. You need more depth in here, or you need some depth psychology treatment.
Right.
Somehow to shift this kind of thinking or whatever it is for yourself. So, I mean, we can do it as astrologers, but again, it becomes like therapy and counselling. Then, doesn't it?
Well, that's what it is. I mean, a lot of what we do is just that, and it's based on a certain level of trust, and it's based on the willingness of the client to take the time to hear that. Now, I've had clients who said they don't like their charts, which I say, I'm sorry about that. Nothing I can do.
You can't get another one.
You can't get another one, no. Not this life, at least. And so the idea is when that happens, I say, well, this is sort of, I mean, I remember having this conversation with Robert Hand, who's a wonderful astrologer, probably one of the older and better, wizened, sages of our business. And I asked him the question once. He said, this was a conversation I had with him. I said, can we change our chart? He says, no, we can't change our charts. We cannot change our, but what we can do is we can learn to adapt to them, and we can influence them in some way by leaning into those difficult aspects and plowing through them. This is how we can sort of mitigate that disparity that people have when they see their charts and they have difficult times.
Well, that's the alchemy of astrology, isn't it? So that the deeper we look, the transformative kind of way of understanding how we're operating and then shifting it, like being conscious. That's the whole thing as well. Being conscious of how our characters play out. The things we like, the things we don't like. Again, like where can we can't move that Venus from Virgo.
No, and the thing is that requires work. It requires work on the client's part, not necessarily the astrologer. I think our role as astrologers is to present the information to them in as accurate and as kind and as gentle a way as we can, and then they have to be able to be willing to do the work to get to that spot where they are then beyond that, or willing to accept that this is the way life is. And a lot of it I think a lot of things get drawn into that mix. I mean, there's the whole idea of being in the now, living here and now, understanding where you are. There's a lot of philosophy, even parts of religion and basic other things that become part of it, part of a belief system as to how you can deal with difficult times. Because most people are not, if everything is hunky-dory, you're not going to hear from the people. They're going to be off on their yacht or wherever. They're not going to be, worried about difficult problems. It's when they have these problems.
They're actually the hardest readings to do, when someone comes to you and just says, oh, you tell me. Just come and, you tell me what I should know,
I agree, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I remember in the past sort of thinking, oh gosh, okay, I'll just, I'll just talk to you about you. And then there's no, back and forward. So you can't get into it deep enough, again, then that becomes like I'm just speaking the oracle, which we can do.
Right.
We can do. But yeah, of course, it's going to be much more meaningful if we get the person involved. I like to be more of a teacher to the people, to clients as well, and get them interested in knowing more about, their Venus in Virgo, or, like delving further. It's almost like I give them homework.
Mm-hmm. No, I do too, and I think that's one of the best ways to learn astrology is actually to teach it and to be involved in a. You can't really teach it to yourself. I mean, you can teach it to yourself to an extent, but you really need to have the conversations with other astrologers to arrive at the place where the construct makes sense. And you've been in conferences yourself, and I have too, where we have conversations with other astrologers, and we start talking about an aspect, and there are multiple aspects, and there are multiple angles to an aspect, multiple ways of looking at that. Even though we're looking through the same lens, you can take a photographer, you can take 5 photographers and say, go shoot this one object, and they're all going to come back with something different, but it's still going to be that same object. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can say, go take a picture of this building, or this woman, or this man, or this child, or whatever, a cat, whatever, and it's going to come back differently because that's through their lens. And I think that's probably a pretty good analogy for what astrology is like. We all have different lenses, and it's going to come down more to the personal manner of the person. But what we're really driving at here is the ethics of astrology and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And for people to be in social media and being, which is such a unusual construct in itself. I mean, there's parts of it that I like, parts of it that I'm still quite uncertain about. I think as we look back in history, we're going to say, wow, whatever happened back then? Or maybe we never go back there, but it's going to be it has changed human relationships dramatically. Yeah. Everywhere you go in the world, you can see the way people are turning to their phones and to social media in ways they never have before. It really creates a very odd sort of, collective psychosis of sorts, where people are wondering why they're not liked or why they are liked, and they begin to get down on themselves when 15, 20 years ago nobody would think twice of that.
Yeah, well, I did a bit of a write-up on the Facebook chart, or, when it was born into the world, which was February 4th, 2004. And, I thought I could have a look because I actually, Eris was discovered in 2003, so just before social media or the birth of that. And, you put something out as that incident happened with me, you put something out and all of a sudden it's like bigger than you ever thought it was going to be.
Right, exactly.
It's like Eris, inadvertently starting the Trojan War. It's like, and then people are just out to get you. Or,
see, that's what I don't understand. I don't understand what's the motive behind going after somebody. I'm not sure.
I don't know, because if I don't like something, I just move on.
Right.
Like, that's their opinion, that's this. I just move on. Like, I don't want to get involved. And I see a lot of arguments or whatever, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to spend time arguing here. Like, what for? But it's amazing how people seem to jump on and have this thing that they can see themselves as the authority that can kind of wreck your post or your day, or
Well, it's more about, I think what it comes down to it's more about personal. Believe it or not, it really, Facebook has made everybody a personal marketer. Everybody has their own brand now, and so as a result of having so many brands, everybody is branded. And as a result of that, you've got to be unique and different.
Well, that's very Aries, isn't it? Eris in Aries.
Well, it is. I mean, branding is all about me, of course. And I think that having to brand yourself in some ways, and I mean that in the term of marketing, here you are trying to be somebody that's not like anybody else, and you're unique. You take this soapbox as an opportunity to sort of stand up and stake your claim. And, of course, as you know, when two things my mother always told me never discuss at a party were religion and politics. And so those are the two hot topics. And astrology does kind of fall into one of those categories just because it has a place where people can have opinions. And you have to ask yourself, where do we draw the line? How do we right this wrong? I guess that's a very large question, and I don't expect you to have an answer. But it is a good question that would be worthy of a astrology conference discussion amongst astrologers. How do we right the wrong, and how do we dispel the myths of astrology, and how do we bring more credence to it? Those are all good topics.
I think all we can do is just keep to our own sort of standards, and the good people will persevere. I mean, I'm saying good people, whatever. Some people might not like what I do. I don't know. And, it doesn't really matter in this sense. You just got to keep up with what you have to do, and so will everyone else. I mean, we can't. Is there a way to standardize things? That's going to take away the beauty of astrology, or the fun of it, or the uniqueness, isn't it? So
it does, yeah.
It's kind of an impossible task.
Yeah, I agree.
And no one's going to take that on. I mean, again, but we can put our, what do you call it? The organisations that we have around the world that have, grouped in different countries by schools and that type of thing. Like, people can always find, reputable places to, either go and study or find a group to be part of, and that type of thing. And that's what I'd suggest, like the social media stuff where you're talking to people in a group that you really don't know. You need to sort of get a group that you trust.
Yeah.
Somehow, because some of the things that fly around with people giving each other advice is a bit scary. On, astrological advice, like someone putting up a chart and what do you think? Oh, this is it, and you kind of glance through it and go, oh dear, how much of that are they taking in?
Right.
And again, I don't know how much they know themselves enough, or how much each other person knows. Like if I was to tell you something about your Saturn, you'd be strong enough, let's say, to take it, or whatever it was. You know what I mean? Like, you'd make your own conviction about it. It doesn't matter what I'd say in that sort of sense. But vulnerable people out there, which something is told, like, your Uranus Venus means this and this and this, and then it's kind of stuck in them. So again, I think, whoever's listening or newly open to astrology, it's important to look things up. It's not one sentence is not going to sum it up.
No, it's very heavily nuanced, and that's the word we really have to. It can be. There's a lot of room for wiggle in there, but that's where people get frustrated, I think. They get frustrated by the fact that there's so many variables. They say, well, what's going on here? I say, well, this is what this and this is. Well, what is that? And then you have to sort of...
and that one says that, and so-and-so says this, and you guys have said that, and yeah, exactly.
And it's not hard fast. It's more based on the interpretation. I think the idea of the photographer is the best example of, you take 5 photographers, give them a camera, they're all going to take a different picture. I think that's probably about as close as we're ever going to get. But I think that when it comes to the whole social media thing and the way information is pushed out there, astrology is not entertainment. It's not entertainment. It should not be seen as a way for boosting someone's ego. If anything, it should be the astrologer. I believe an ideal astrologer is a humble person, is someone who wants to help people, who has a strong empathetic heart, who is sensitive to what people are going through. It's not about bombastic staging and jumping up and down and shouting that the world is coming to an end, the energy is flying through the air. It's not like that. That's sort of an over-dramatized Hollywood kind of construct that doesn't serve anything. If anything, it sets us back in some ways. It's not taken seriously.
Yeah, well, everyone's got to find the people, the person, I don't know, the guru that they trust.
Right.
And everyone does, that, like, I like what they say, they speak to me, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of that, of course, going on. I mean, I just suggest for people, and again, part of what the CIA has always, in a sense, tried to do is by what we say, we teach them something along the way, how the planets are moving, what they're going to do, all that type of thing. And then, invite them onto a journey to find out more. Like the best we're ever going to be is to take the astrological journey and start exploring it for ourselves instead of, waiting for someone to tell us what that truth is. So get to know your chart,
Exactly.
Start
that is the best place to start, is to get to know your chart, get to understand the complexities, work with somebody if you are really interested. It is work, there's no question about it.
Find a mentor as well. I've said that before, like with all that kind of, everything out there, and again, being somewhat confusing, book in to see a mentor twice a year as you're studying Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So that you can clear things up. So you can say, well, what about this? This has been confusing me, so that things can be cleared up. So I really urge, people teaching themselves out there, because that's inevitable and that's good. I think that's good. It's helping a lot of people heal their own psyche and just get to know themselves better through astrology. But don't try and teach it all yourself. At one stage, I remember I caved in, this is years ago, when I just decided I have to know this from the start, because I'm confusing myself. And this is before social media and internet and stuff, So to get the clear picture, so again, I'd advise people to find a mentor that you like, and it's worth investing in.
It is worth investing in, because they're the only person who can really have the open-ended conversations, because it's not a concrete. It has elements of concreteness to it. There are certain characteristics we can espouse to Venus, Mars, all that stuff, but it does require the subtle art of interpretation, and there's so many different characteristics there. There's all the different angles, and then the aspects can be quite daunting. I teach an introduction to astrology class at a local school here, and I go through all those elements and all the planets and all the signs, but I give them a series of adjectives and allow them to put the story together themselves, and I do it in a period of time that they at least get an understanding, enough of an understanding to at least recognize the chart, what's going on there, how they can use it to their best interest, when things are going to be, when to hold and when to fold, as I've always said. But I think that there's a lot of value there, but it does require work. I'd say that the biggest thing we probably take away from this conversation is that for people to be cautious on social media, because of the fact that, this is going to sound trite in some way, but it is fake news, and that is exactly what it is. There's a lot of fake news and false prophets out there, and I think it's important that you go with a reputable astrologer, someone that knows what they're doing, and someone that you can trust, and who's not just going to sort of grandstand their way through their year chart. It's too important to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people, can be very aware. Once you start reading, you can tell, right? Mm-hmm. So again, if you take some of the things in a lighter vein, like that it's just entertainment. As you said, astrology shouldn't be entertainment. Well, it's out there as that.
It is.
Like,
I know.
I'm just going to entertain you for a little bit here, and that can be fun. So just as long as you treat it like that,
Right. And don't describe it as being serious astrology, as somebody shouting in your face about something.
Yeah, that you puff yourself up and go, Aquarius are the best lovers, I've been told, or whatever.
Right, exactly.
Maybe they are, but what's the reasoning behind that? I don't know. But there's all kinds of stuff like that out there. So look, again, I just say, if it's hasn't got an author attributed to it, this is why so many astrologers, they have their own websites and their name attached, and that's a good sign, isn't it?
It is a good sign, but it can still be cut and pasted, and it is, as I know my stuff's been cut and pasted, and I just say, okay, whatever, at least I know it's accurate. I'm not worried about it. So
do you follow it up and sort of go, hey, you've copied and pasted my stuff?
I don't. I haven't. And that's just, that's not an argument I want to start. Like you say, I just say, it's just not worth it for me. I just let it go. So.
Yeah.
But
anyway, that happens to so many of us.
It does. And it's just a matter of, the whole idea is just to, we're trying to just set the record straight in some way. That was my purpose in having you on today. And I'm glad you were able to join me. Because I just wanted to sort of get this out there as a conversation piece, saying, listen, there's a lot of false astrology out there. Just be careful what you get. Make sure the person's got some credibility, especially if you're trying to spend money on it or follow it. And, people are probably making decisions based on stuff that's not true, and that could be in itself dangerous. So.
Yeah.
Anyway,
very good, Chris. It's a conversation that's going around. That's for sure. I think Chris Brennan did something just the other day on that.
Oh, good.
Standardizing astrology, or not. The ethics, as in what it takes to be an astrologer.
Right.
What does it mean, and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So, these conversations are important. So, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm not sure if I'm such an authority, but I do.
Well, no, but
I do see a lot.
I wanted to get your opinion. Yeah, I wanted to get your opinion, and I wanted to, sort of get it out there, because it was sort of an inflammatory thing that happened on Facebook, and I just wanted to sort of show you solidarity with you, and just sort of set the record straight and just have people think twice about it. Just have the conversation. So Thank you
that
so
was
much.
great. I mean, as many people as let's say it was negative kind of press, let's say, there was so much good backup from a lot
there
of
was.
good
That's
people out
very
there. So
that's
they're
very
going,
encouraging.
Jules, you know, like, I don't know. It's somehow it was a necessary thing that happened. I mean, the eclipse was on my MC, so what do you know?
It's bound to happen, something like that. It makes sense. Yeah, a little attention for you. Anyway, there's, as I've heard before, there's no such thing as bad coverage. So, you know, there's no such thing as bad news. So all of this
I'm
is
not
good.
sure.
I'm not either. But anyway, we'll save that for another topic. Anyway, my guest today has been Julia Simas. She is the guiding light, or the great guider, as I said before, the guider of the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, which is out of Australia, cosmicintelligenceagency.com. And there's a wide range of information on there, great reports, great people writing for her and the organization, and it's great. And hopefully I will see you at one of the next conventions that we have coming up.
Are you going to UAC?
I am.
Excellent. That's the one.
That's the one.
Fabulous. That's going to be here before we know it. Thanks, Chris. All the best with your show.
Same to you. Take care. Bye, Julia. Bye-bye.
See ya.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.